Okay, so good morning, Tom, and good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Morning.
Good. Well, thanks for everybody taking their time this morning to conduct this webcast. It's going to be an interesting session, I'm sure. We're going to be talking about sort of marketing in a recession. It's been quite interesting this morning with Sky News saying that GDP's bounced back, and but there is going to be a slower growth, obviously, because of the situation we're in at the moment. So it's probably quite on point discussion we're going to have this morning. So I guess from the viewer's perspective, just to introduce ourselves initially. So I'm Joe Bailey. I'm the managing director of a company called Generate UK. We're a full service digital marketing agent over 12 years now. And for me, it was quite interesting when we set up the business. It was in a recession. I was just about there. Well, I just had my first child with my wife, and it was all a bit sort of hair raising, moving from a reasonably well paid position into sort of having nothing and trying to sort of fight for everything, and being a recession as well. It made it even harder, but also at the same time, I think it sort of helped shape the business to what we have today. So its experiences do that, and it'll be really interesting to get sort of your views on how we're marketing to this digital marketing agent because of the current situation. Has that changed our views, and should we be doing less or do more or doing things differently? So that's me, Joe Bailey, Managing Director of Generate UK. Over to Tom.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I'm Tom Barton. I'm currently acting head of marketing at Censornet.
A reasonably well-paid
maternity role, but I've had head of marketing positions before, and I've worked with Generate for a few years now. But yeah, my day-to-day is focused quite heavily around digital, which is, I'm sure we'll come on to a lot of that as we go forward. But yeah, that's who I am.
Thanks, Tom. Jack?
I'm Jack Turner. I am the marketing operations specialist at Generate UK. So as part of my role, I help support our clients, B2B and B2C, as well as general marketing activity of Generate UK.
Very good. So I guess to kickstart proceedings, like I said at the start of when I sort of do more or doing things session, and I think we looked at it was all fresh at the time. It was all new for us anyway. UK. Over to Tom. Get the business moving and look at ways to attract new business so we can deliver marketing for those companies, and probably that sort of negated some of the sort of aspects of it being a recession because we were so infused by it all, but we did come across those, we're slashing our spending at the moment, we're going to hold off, we're going to look at next year. Those were the type of sort of, I don't say excuses, but they were the responses coming back from the companies that we were sort of approaching at the time. And I think from our perspective, we did look at, I guess, the market. We looked at our sort of competitors, we looked at the messaging, and we looked at what they were trying to do, and we tried to sort of position ourselves in a slightly different way to our competitors. And I think you do that anyway. So I don't think that because it was in a recession, you do that, generally. I think the basis is that from an operation perspective, every penny counted. Like, for us, as we were trying to grow the business, it was every penny counted. So we had to be doing things bigger and better, and we had to be delivering probably over and above what a customer would expect, just because of the situation around the economic climate. And I think there is, companies expect more, but even in a recession, they probably even expect even more from the supplier, that you're providing more value in a time that is hard, and it's hard for all the knock-on effects through industry. It's a very hard time at the moment. So I guess the question for sort of the companies that we were sort of approaching at the time of marketing, where are you doing things differently? Are you thinking about things differently?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, Censornet, we're a cloud cybersecurity company. I probably didn't say that at the beginning. Should have done.
Right.
And we've got a single cloud platform which has web security, email security, cloud access security broker, which is cloud application security, and multi-factor authentication, all in one platform, which is a very unique proposition for us. Now, what's a proposition for the market? But what's been, it's not good, but what's been interesting, especially during the current times, is, you know, with people, businesses having to move remotely, and that's worked quite heavily in our favour. So in terms of it being a recession for us, it's kind of been good because we've been there to patch over the big problem that most people have. Those businesses that can survive and can continue, we've got something that helps them do that. So what we've switched to a little bit is being, because obviously you have to be, like you said, Joe, you have to be quite cognizant of the fact that people are thinking about, you know, budgets, they're thinking about the future, everyone's a bit tentative. So we've moved a lot of our messaging a lot more into a bit more empathy. So we're trying to help more, we're trying to be around more, which we are anyway, but it's just people don't want to be sold to at the moment. I think we're finding. So, you know, those kind of fairly direct messages we were giving before are we soften those, doing a lot more in terms of content creation to support and advise. And I think what's good at Censornet, and I think you mentioned it as well, in the early days of Generate, is it's going above and beyond. And luckily at Censornet, we've got a fantastic support service team. You know, we've ranked pretty high in cloud cybersecurity company. I probably didn't say. So yeah, so I mean, we're sitting in a nice place at the moment in terms of how we can help people, and we excel in the areas that matter. But yeah, I think the big thing, I think one platform, which is very a more empathetic tone, as opposed to being very technical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and too sales driven, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, obviously, sales is the goal. But I think if you can be there for people, especially in this time, because there's a lot of unrest and a lot of unease, but enable people and empower people to carry on. So I mean, we've recently released a new report which explores some of the critical security challenges, etc. And we did a survey, luckily, without planning it, right at the beginning of lockdown. So we got a good idea of, you know, how security professionals were feeling, and we caught them as lockdown was happening, and it's just giving that insight back to people to say, look, you're not on your own, you know, this is a problem everyone's got, we're here to help, that kind of stuff. So
in essence, has your messaging changed then as a business, like with your potential prospects? Has your messaging fundamentally changed, or are you sort of sympathetic to what's going on around your prospects?
Fundamentally, no. As to whether it needs to change in the future, I think there is some work being done, because I think it has given everybody the chance to kind of, as these things often do, to kind of reevaluate where you are. And obviously you look at where your competition are and what competition is saying. But I think what's unique about Censornet is we're placed in a position where the new normal is an advantage for what messages we were giving before. I think we need to make some changes to our messaging anyway, just from a general housekeeping perspective. But we haven't needed to fundamentally change too much. We just had to, just with our comms, just be a bit more empathetic in what we're trying to talk to people about, rather than going fairly sales heavy. But yeah, fortunate that we've not had to adjust quite so much.
I think you are, because we obviously speak to our own clients, you know, have had to adapt, and we've had to adapt with them in terms of their message. Often, you know, we find during these type of times, and there hasn't been loads of them, but you know, the times when there has been sort of economic downturn, is that the automatic reaction is to stop and save, when ultimately that's probably one of the worst decisions I think a company can make, because it's very short term, and there are, ways to make marketing budgets work harder. There are ways to make your message go further, which actually probably doesn't cost physical money. Time, yes, but maybe not in terms of sort of physical money. And we do find a lot of our clients and people we speak to are evaluating their strategy, and we're also finding that they're doing a lot of housekeeping, as you mentioned, like themselves, to sort of get themselves in a position to when things do start picking up,
professionals were feeling, and we caught
the ground running. So we find at the moment like projects and campaigns are quite rife. Sort of working long term, sort of at the moment, is quite difficult for anybody. Tomorrow, let alone that day itself. So it's quite interesting state.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, obviously towards the beginning of this year, as I said, I've at the top of the intro, I'm acting head of marketing, while the marketing director is currently on maternity leave.
And your prospects.
And it was a long campaign for the year. It was a big focus on a certain type of messaging. And yeah, okay, from that campaign perspective, that messaging then became a little bit less relevant to the world. And we have, as you said, Joe, started to look at small campaign sprint type things to try and, stay relevant. And because obviously the narrative was kind of changing quickly, you couldn't go, well, and even now look at 2021, although it's getting a bit clearer what the picture is, you kind of having to take stock of everything you've done over the last, as I say, 8-9 months, to look at what's the best route forward, but how much of 2021 is that going to work for, and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of trying to create a series of short, medium, and long terms to make sure that you make sense through 2021, if that makes any sense. But yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, I guess one of the biggest challenges marketers are facing right now is that sort of changing audience and what they require. Because I mean, if you look at Censornet as a classic example of that, I mean,
we've not had to adjust.
We've been on sort of cybersecurity in the office. However, when that office doesn't exist anymore, how do you realign all the marketing you've done up to that point to then target home workers? I mean, was that a difficult experience for you? Was it something that kind of became quite easy?
I mean, luckily, as I said before, I mean, a lot of we've luckily spoken a lot in our messaging previously about, because the way our product platform works is completely aligned to remote working anywhere, and a lot of the messaging in our Defence 365 campaign, which was the focus for the year, which has kind of not been quite as in the spotlight as it should have been, was about, work is no longer a destination. It's everywhere. You can work in a coffee shop, you can work at home, you can work and
cost physical money, time.
The way its agents are deployed, we can secure all the endpoints, all that kind of stuff, and with MFA, make sure you're kept secure, the right people are logging in. So all those things which are now top of mind, we've already been communicating about. But I think what we've done is we've probably removed some of the exact focus to the technical specialists in businesses, if that makes sense. One, because a lot of the businesses that are affected are, our sweet spot. A lot of the businesses that are affected might not necessarily have a technical minded,
working long term sort of at the moment,
role person, or even in some cases people like an MD like Joe has in a small business. You're the one kind of sometimes having to deal with that, and you can get people come at you with speeds and feeds saying you need this, and this, and ultimately what you just want is how do I actually do that? How do I actually fix that problem? So yeah, it's we've had to probably broaden rather than restrict, which plays into the point I think we made earlier. Although yes, there has been the need for some trimming, and it was a long, harder, widen audiences, all that kind of stuff, and obviously with other people cutting back is not so much a luxury in our space, because our competitors are big with large pockets, so it hasn't made much of a difference in terms of us getting a bit more share of voice, but it just means we can kind of be more relevant to more people, if that makes sense at this time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a trend we've seen across the businesses that have been successful over the past 9 months have been those ones that have been able to adapt. So if you look at sort of breweries starting to sell hand sanitizer, or exhibition companies going into the virtual sphere, I guess the key thing to do during the current period is just to be flexible and to experiment and just to see what sticks. Because I think tried and tested methods that don't work anymore. They might in the future once we get to a long.
How much of 2021 is
mindset again? But in the short term, it just has to be try things and prepare to fail maybe for a week and then try something else. I think that's a key thing for marketers to have that mindset nowadays.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges is getting, obviously, there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess one of the biggest challenges marketers are facing.
It's getting not commitment, but it's getting people converted. I mean, people are even more reluctant, I think, than ever. Yes, I think they're a bit more. We get happier to digest top of the funnel stuff, and they're happier to sit on webinars and happier to go because it's easier now because you're just sitting at home. You go like virtual events, for example. We don't need to actually get on a train and go anywhere. You just turn your computer on. Don't even really need to be sitting on a computer if you don't want to. But that's the kind of thing we're almost having. We've got a harder challenge because when we did a lot of physical events, our marketing budget has always gone on a lot of physical events, and we've lost those, and it's been quite a big hit for us because huge amount of lead generation, networking, etc. happens at those kind of events. So trying to find a replacement has been really tough. But I think when you don't have that somebody in front of you, it is like you say, Jack. You are having to try and do new things and try different stuff quickly to try and see what. And it's weird because sometimes a few months something will stick, and then a few months, depending on what the news says, something won't stick, and you're thinking, well, that hasn't worked this time. Yeah, it's was about
Absolutely. I think from Generate's perspective, our own marketing, we have adapted. We've obviously been in a webinar today, or a webcast, should I say, and we have done a series of sort of interviews with business leaders. We've done some great webinars, which is designed ultimately, yes, to engage with new business, but there's been a clear message is to try to help sort of other businesses get ideas and try to network and bring businesses together and give them hopefully sound advice that they can take on themselves. So we've never been a sales driven type of you've got to have a website because you've got to do this, and we play on very much a consult
our sweet spot
with businesses to facilitate growth, and that's really been the message has been the same, but it's adapted based on, I guess, the current climate. And the channels that we've been using have adapted based on the current climate, and your channels, Tom, have adapted based on the current climate. So I think everybody is sort of in a similar boat. I think, Jack, you mentioned about some industries that have been hugely hit in terms of we are relatively lucky, I think, in terms of the markets that we have. We work across multiple sectors, which is great. Yes, we've worked in the travel, we've worked with travel clients as well, and exhibition companies, and their world's been decimated. So it's almost like you can be flexible, but when your industry has been decimated, it's very difficult. Well, it's hugely difficult. It's almost impossible. So I think it's a very interesting marketplace at the moment, and I think the business and confidence in business is being driven obviously by government, which I don't want to get into a political debate at the moment, but obviously communication, as we all know, being marketers, is hugely important. Clarity around what's happening in the economy, clarity around what's happening with the health side of things, and etc. have a massive
brewery starting to sell hand sanitizer,
and that is, I think part of the problem that we are currently faced is certainty. in business, and certainty in spend, and certainty in knowing what's around the corner. And obviously we're in our second lockdown at the moment, but knowing the vaccine is potentially there around the corner.
Work anymore.
They're thinking that 2021 is just going to be completely different, which we all hope it will be. So yeah, it's interesting at the moment. Tom, have you used any other channels? You mentioned about the virtual exhibition world, which is obviously you're going down there. Has there been any other channels that have actually that's been quite useful to use, or that are different to sort of pre-COVID?
I think we always done webinars, but they've always been a kind of and just part of the mix. Whereas a lot of our they've been kind of a main thrust for a lot of our campaigns, and like we're doing now, getting on, talking to people, and giving people something to digest and watch while they're working from home. It's I think webinar wise, we've upped our output from that perspective. But I mean, virtual events have been there's lots of different types. There's virtual roundtables, virtual face-to-face. I say virtual face-to-face, it's just basically like video calling someone. But and you mentioned virtual exhibitions and stuff. They've all been different. I think the thing is, because they've always existed, but they've always played second fiddle to physical face-to-face. The old adage, people buy from people. People like being in front of people. There's body language and all that kind of stuff, which you kind of lose a little bit when you're at a virtual event. But I think that the challenge has been shifting from our classic physical events to virtual, is trying to find a virtual events that work. And I think there's a lot of companies that have switched to virtual without thinking about it. And it's meant we have been victim to a few where they've not performed. And then those that have done it for a long time, you can tell when you're on there the amount of interaction, engagement they get, and incentivizing getting people onto it, the type of speakers they have. So I would just say, if anyone is looking at virtual events, be as diligent as you can, ask as many questions as you can. You'll soon get a feel whether it's somebody's just licensed a platform and given you access to it, as opposed to somebody they've done this before.
Great webinars, which is
because it will make a difference to the type of event you have. But in terms of different, I think we've put a bit more of our budget behind digital, more than we have done in the past. We've tried a lot more through LinkedIn, and we're quite sector agnostic, so we don't really have a specialism. But the way some of our team works, they work in certain sectors, and working with them through InMail in certain areas is something we wanted to do more of in the past, and this year has kind of accelerated that, because it just makes sense at the moment, especially with everyone's inboxes are full of stuff at the moment. I'm sure you're suffering like everyone else is.
Oh yes. Yeah.
So cutting through that noise is really difficult. So, as I say, trying more touch points, using some automation through LinkedIn. It's more been just focusing on
based on the current climate. So I think everybody,
as I say, just the virtual event side has just been a weird experiment this year, trying to find, and we have been lucky to find a few that worked really well for us. But you realise, how much we need physical events.
Yeah.
And so it's then made,
which is great. Yes, we've worked
next year planning interesting, because we'll need to be like, well, if we don't,
and exhibition companies
are doing the right things in these other areas to compensate. And I think that's the thing. It was such a sharp shock in March that there wasn't time to go, how are we going to deal with this? It was, okay, well, what are we going to do now? In the next 4 weeks, what we're going to do in the next 2 months. You couldn't, like we said before,
It's a very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. We found our own platforms as well to use to do our own events. currently got one we're trialing just to put together our own roundtables, because the difficult part of nowadays is getting hold of people, because obviously people aren't in offices, so phone numbers aren't working, email addresses, because their inboxes are full of crap, so they don't want to, it's very hard to get
Really important clarity,
email marketing, and even sales outreach marketing. So trying to create our own event where we can go to targeted accounts, bring them together in front of our sales people.
knock-on effect,
Virtual roundtable event is something we're trying to do ourselves.
It's interesting what you say there, because you're absolutely right in terms of the inbox now, and we've found it in terms of the standard sort of email marketing campaigns that companies deliver. And Jack, you're in the firing line here, but ultimately you find, which we are finding, I know, as a business, that the message is so important. How do you stand out against others when that inbox is so full up to one? You're just going to be completely download a piece of material, join a webinar, etc. And I find that is probably one of the biggest challenges for marketeers at the moment in terms of getting their message out. Is relatively the same. It's actually the engagement levels are dramatically probably lower to what they were pre-COVID, because there's so much more going into their inbox. And actually, well, do you want to comment on that, Jack, a bit? Because I want to talk about something else, but it's going to take us on a different tangent.
Sorry, I guess it just comes touching on what both of you have said, really, about sort of what businesses should be doing right now when it comes to marketing. And I think Tom hitting on different touch points and trying to hit multiple touch points is so valuable right now, because we've heard of distributed workforces, but we've also got a distributed audience. People are using different screens, they're not always watching TV, they're not taking the subway to work. So it's
from that perspective, but
a lot, because if you're not spending that money being seen, you're not going to be able to engage them to it, where the ad is sort of this is John, he doesn't know who you are, he doesn't know what you do, he doesn't know what you're selling, good luck. And it's how you have to really make sure that people are aware of you to be able to get to sell them, especially during now when budgets are tighter and trust is lower. So the key sort of thing to take away from that is to be advertising and to be doing it in a lot of different places, because you just don't know nowadays where your audience is going to be, and that is going to be something that's going to really help your engagement rates as well. But yeah, sorry, Joe, I tried to go.
No, it's good. And you talk, you're sort of edging towards sort of like the share of market and share of voice, and I think you did a piece recently which is probably worth mentioning during this session, because it's invaluable, really, I think. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, of course. So our sort of focus at Generate since March has really been on having to maximize your current budget, because we know that budgets are going to be cut. It's a fact of life when sort of a pandemic hits. The key is not to take away as much as maybe the finance team would want to take away, and trying to fight those battles. And the way to justify that is through share of voice. So share of voice is the concept, or the measurement, sorry,
and then
is competing when it comes to share of market. So in an equal world, if you had a 60% share of voice, which is your advertising, so you're being seen by 60% of the people, you would have
people on to it, the type of speaker.
Yeah. I'd love to live in that ideal world. It doesn't always happen. But in a recession, one of the things that happens quite quickly is budgets get slashed, not just your budgets, but competition's budgets as well. In these circumstances, say your competitor has 80% market share, but is only spending 60% share of voice, they are eventually going to see their market share dwindle, because they're not advertising to the level they need to really be seen to be bought. And that is really good news for brands that aren't cutting their spending by a lot, because they're still spending to around about the same level that they were previously, and potentially with budgets being cut elsewhere, the money that's needed to increase share of voice could actually decrease. So you could actually, by spending a little bit less, you could be getting a lot more, because others have cut down by so much more.
Mail in certain areas,
market share will increase just because competitors are decreasing their budgets. So it's a really good argument to basically say to
at the moment, especially with everyone.
Cut it by 10%, but don't cut it by more, because we really need that money right now to make sure that long term we're going to see that growth. Because those who do spend,
as I say, trying more
term see better growth than those who don't. And I think that's a really key argument to say right now, is we need to be thinking long term.
And I think that's probably testament to the team at Generate, because I think we haven't cut, have we, any budgets? And we've actually
increased, really.
Yeah, we've actually increased spend, and that is we've got some stats on our website, etc. And is having a big increase in terms of key search terms, as well as our brand visibility, which has increased considerably, probably over the last 6 months, I would say. Throughout the pandemic. So yeah, it does go to show that with the right tact and the right
next year planning,
you can only spend what you can afford, and that's one of the messages. Don't spend stupid amount and rob Peter to pay Paul. That you don't want to do that. You need to spend within the boundaries of what you can afford as a business. But ultimately, it's worth looking, and this goes back to research, it goes back to focusing on the channels, the audience, the messaging, and then as Jack rightly said, people are consuming in so many different ways at the moment, different screens, different media, different channels, and it's the message, the cloud
to do our own events
across to allow us to engage and know what channels are working, and that's one of the big things for us at the moment. So I'm going to switch a little bit, because
their inboxes are full of crap. So
2008, when we set up the business, like we were in a proper global recession at that time. The financial crisis was huge. Banks had basically turned everybody over, and we were in a really bad place. But the knock-on effects of that come 2009, 2010, when we were growing. We were finding that, and it sort of played into our, unfortunately, but it played into sort of our sort of. You're absolutely right in terms of the marketing companies at the time were, the standard sort of. They weren't adapting because the age of digital was coming out as well. They were maybe more on the traditional marketing side, and what going here, but ultimately new startups coming in when we were already established, maybe a year, 18 months, 2 years down the line. There was still lots of smaller startups, independents, that were coming into the market that were then trying to, I guess we were operating in very much the small to medium, but join a webinar, etc. And they were coming in and nabbing that small business offers, because they could offer, marketing at cheaper rates. Now we never compete on price. For us, it's about value, it's about service, it's about results. But that's what we were finding in the marketplace, and they were coming in and nabbing that market. So our messaging had to change at that point to talk about more value and about more results-driven marketing and technology that was coming into the marketplace. But as it's sort of grown, like these some didn't stick around, some fell by the way, and it'll be really interesting to know. We're in a completely different place as a business now, 12 years on, but it'd be really interesting to know how markets
marketing. And I think Tom hit
ahead, because are we going to see a lot more consultants coming into the marketplace for cyber security? Are we going to see more sort of one-man bands coming in for marketing? Possibly, and I would imagine we will, because the level of redundancies, and will they be able to, these specialists where they've got amazing knowledge, will they be able to get themselves back into the job that they once had? Possibly not. So will they just set up by themselves, and more freelancers coming into the marketplace that we had? And I think the way of working now as well has probably adapted that, in terms of, you don't need an office anymore. So it's fascinating to know what the market is going to be like in certainly in the professional services market, where I guess where we sit. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, and certainly in the cyber world as well. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Is that something you kind of experienced, Tom, where you're seeing different places because you just don't know nowadays? I guess the word, like personalities in the cybersecurity sphere, where actually they have influence over what to recommend and how to recommend it. Because I guess that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, influencers in the space have existed, and it's something we've leveraged a bit more recently, because I think as with most things, you know, people go off referrals, people go off reviews, people go off ratings and things like that, and I think it's definitely an avenue.
I'd sort of
Enough in yet, but it's definitely something I'd want to bring in. There's a few places that we can definitely leverage that. But yeah, I mean, going back a bit into what Joe was saying, I think in terms of the consultants and the individuals, obviously, we tend to
is not to take away as
more through. And you know, some recent channel partners have been, you know, exactly the situation you described. You know, were part of a bigger organization. You know, redundancies happen. They set up on their own.
Is competing.
It's great because there's another person pushing your brand and pushing your product, and often not, it's based on a relationship, and it's normally a good relationship. And so I think back on the influence bit, yes, there are people that are in the space. It's just, I think
this doesn't always happen, but
their voice is probably going to become a bit more expensive as time goes on. It's already not cheap. But yeah,
I think going back to what Joe mentioned about the need to not compete on price, I think that is a very key thing right now, because it's so easy to just say half price, buy our stock, we need you to buy our things now, please. When actually it's justifying the value in what you're selling, which is very key right now. I mean, for example, Rolls-Royce actually saw an increase to that luxury car spending would be one of the markets to boom, but it has done because the value in that brand has always been there. So people who have the money still will still spend it. And I think that's the thing, is that people still do have a disposable income that hasn't gone away for everyone. I know some are suffering from this, but it's justifying why they should spend their money with you is kind of what a key element of marketing in recession is right now. Is you're fighting against a much more, a little bit less. You could be stand out and position yourself to say you need us right now. And I think Generate has been in a lucky position because people need marketing. I mean, you're on this webinar today to learn how to market in a recession, and I think people, again with Censornet, they need cybersecurity right now because threats are getting larger. We're in a completely new sphere, and I think it's about finding that value, which is going to be important for your business right now, or how you can find that value.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I know we mentioned about, you know, selling on price, etc. You know, I mean, with Censornet, we have fortunately often been in a position where we can. We don't obviously like to, but we can, because of our size and how our platform's built, etc. We can be fairly cost effective, but which is obviously playing into the messaging going forward and consolidating and cutting down the number of point products you've got, etc. And if you've got that cyber skills shortage, you don't need to go and check in multiple different modules. You can just do it all in one. Anyway, sales tip. You can. What we're even finding now is that where the market is in recession, struggling, obviously people are looking at contracts they've got with other vendors, etc. You know, and what we're finding is in some cases our competitors are cheaper than us now because they need to hold on to the customers they've got. And you know, that's where messaging about what you can actually provide and the level of service you can offer and the support you can offer becomes way more important than, you know, because a lot of the time, if it's a big company, big corporate, the level of service isn't the same, isn't the same as somebody who's a bit smaller team, a bit more
within the boundaries of what you can.
Especially if that company that's looking for a renewal isn't a huge organization themselves, you know, they want to be looked after. So that's where, like you're saying, Jack, you know, messaging is so important at the moment.
We talk about marketing, and we talk about sales, and we talk about prospects and getting the message out there. But actually, you know, you touched on just then, Tom, about customers and how, you know, certainly we I think we've done really well again, this is speaking from a personal perspective, we've done really well during the last sort of 6 months actually to allow customers to spend with us, because they're looking to implement new stuff and take stock and get themselves in a position to move forward. I think that it can't be emphasized how important customers are to businesses at the moment to keep them in a proper global keep the lights on to a point, but also you can't think too far ahead. You've got to think about what's in front of you and how you actually communicate, and not market, but how you communicate with your customers, I think. And it's sort of played into our we've always been on the mantle of we treat our clients as part of our sort of immediate family, in terms of our sort of employees at Generate, and we always try to treat our clients in the way that we would want to be treated by others, and what that is a massive thing for us at the moment. And marketing side, and contracts with clients that work in industries that have been decimated, or extend payment terms, or do things that maybe have been sort of not pushed on, but have come up because of this situation that we're in. And I think that if you can do that as a business, if you can treat your clients and be empathetic with them in terms of their hour of need as well, then I think long term you're always going to be stronger for it, and you're not just your relationship, but you'd hope that the long term at cheaper rates. Now it's going to grow, in terms of revenue as well. And that, again, that's been our sort of mantra at Generate, is to do that. And at the moment, it seems to be, well, I hope it's paying dividends. And we've still got clients that are paused at the moment because they're in an industry like travel that just hasn't and won't probably get back normal until and technology that was coming in Airbus, and they're talking that flights probably won't get back to how they were pre-COVID until 2023. Which is huge, because of the knock-on effect. We're in a completely different place as a business, which is extremely sad. But you hope with the vaccines around the corner, perception may change, but ultimately still won't get back to normal for quite a long time.
It's funny you say that, because
in the marketplace for cyber security,
on the news of the vaccine, and the industry that went the biggest growth was the travel industry, because people are seeing confidence in the market now, which is really encouraging. I mean, you mentioned there's been about a 10% growth in GDP announced today, and I think that's kind of something which is really encouraging for the future, is that we're not going to be in this, hopefully, forever. It's going to be a shorter term recession comparatively to what happened in 2008, and that should really help us in the next year. I think 2021 is going to be a more positive year. We might not be back to normal, but we'll be in a position as marketers to have conversations that probably weren't possible with customers. I mean, in sort of the summertime we've had this year.
That's where we sit. It'll be
we've had, especially in the second half of the year, the amount of times the conversations had to be, they've got no budget, or the project's moved to 2021. So I think,
kind of experience, Tom, where you'll see
will have gone in normally to make dividend to pay off this year. It's probably going to pay off more next year, more so than it would normally, because obviously there's often a bit of a lag when it comes to marketing stuff. But I think you're right, Jack. I think 2021. I think there's probably stuff lining up anyway, but I think the positivity that's coming out of those things will make it hopefully a better year for all of us.
Jack, can I just ask, because we've talked about advertising spend, and it might be for viewers that are watching this, in terms of with Google AdWords, obviously a lot of our companies see that as a bit of a silver bullet to get them right to the top of the search engines as quickly as possible, but obviously they have to pay for that. Have we seen sort of across the board in a generic sense, have key
Yeah, I mean, going back to bit into what Joe
expensive, or are they actually more cost effective because people are stopping spending and so there's less competition?
It kind of falls into that conversation we had earlier about share of voice, and where competitors and companies have cut their spend. So for some industries, like the exhibition industry, which was famously expensive to target previously, keyword costs have gone down a lot. And actually, we found that in areas which are seeing emerging markets like security or compliance, or I guess anything that would require an app nowadays,
and so yeah,
massive booms in the cost of keywords, because people are in a forced upon digital transformation. So the physical targeting of, say, physical products, physical events, physical services, that has gone down. But when it comes to the virtual side of things, so anything that can be bought on e-commerce, things that are services that can be conducted via Zoom or Teams, they have gone up, which I guess just kind of shows how the market has changed in the past year. So the things that were relatively cost effective before have now become very expensive, and the things that were a nightmare to get traction on have now become so much easier. What you're selling, which is very key right now. Yeah, it's a very strange time to be in marketing. It's kind of a lot of the norms we've kind of held. Luxury car spending would be one of the more dramatically. Yeah, especially when it comes to advertising, where things that have worked, like we said at the start of the webcast, things that have worked, tried and tested before, they just don't work anymore. People aren't downloading site assets or income. That hasn't gone away. Clicking on ads as much as they used to. So it is very much about being flexible to trends, really, right now.
But that's generally because of there's so much going on and there's so much competition that your click-through rate is decreased because there's so much more out there.
Yeah,
boxes are so much more for that. That'll be talked about.
Yeah, that's if I get one more email that's asked how I'm doing right now, I think I might have to close my inbox.
You need to get more filtering on that inbox, Shaz. Well, it's been really interesting. I think we should market this webcast as the I've noticed we've all got beards and we've all got glasses, and we should definitely market this as the three marketeers and see what sort of traction it gets into search engines. I'm Portos, definitely.
I could not tell you the other two.
I've tried to remember. It begins with A. Athos? Is it Athos? Portos?
I don't know. I only remember Three Musketeers because there was a dog one that was a cartoon.
Yeah, D'Artagnan.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only Three Musketeers.
Yeah, the Charlie Sheen movie is the only reference I've got.
Right. Okay. On that note. No, I think it's been really good, and Tom, thanks a lot for coming on and just chatting and talking about sort of current experiences and so on.
What we're even finding now is that I
think one of the things I think I've sort of finished on it from my perspective is only speaking from a personal perspective. I know your values don't change, so from a what you do and your messaging, and like, yes, messaging might change, but the core of your message must remain
cheaper than us now, because
when we go back to the whole brand piece, you're trying to build your brand, you're trying to build confidence through your messaging and why people should be working with you. But I think if your values stay the same, then hopefully that will shine through. And I think if you're true to yourself and
isn't
a plan for you, not sort of worry about things that are going on outside of it. Because ultimately, when I started the business, I didn't think about it was a recession. I didn't think about competition. I just got on with what we needed to do as a business to get to that next step. And I think you can look at that now. You need to keep moving and stepping in the right direction. So if you can just be true to yourself, have your plan, do your research, for goodness sake. Don't just, go at it without having that respect and getting the message out there, but actually to allow you to steer, speak to people, speak to professionals, speak to your friends who are working in similar industries, speak to your peers. You know, you've got to take that on board, but ultimately do what you think's right, use your gut, you know, and go for it really, and try to work the, you know, the channels at the best way you can, and yeah, get your assets in play, and make sure that they are resonate with your customers. And if you can resonate and play on their emotions, and from a professional perspective obviously, then ultimately you should reap the rewards. Because if you're not doing it, your competitors are. You know, and that's the biggest thing for us.
And I think one of the big things as well, I think for me anyway, as a marketer in this current environment, is that it is very easy to feel like you're in an island at the moment, especially being,
you know, you can't
an office in your own house, you know, seemingly feeling like you're on your own. But I think, you know, having a discussion here today, and obviously other people we're discussing with their other peers, etc., we're all finding the same challenges all across the board. And I think it's just good to get out there, as you said, Joe, you know, do your research, talk to people, but obviously in this time, go with your gut and try stuff. Because it's whatever you can find that works, let us all know, because it'd be good.
Immediate family, in terms of, I think as well, you know, you have to be brave, you have to try things, because, you know, not everything's going to work. We know that, you know, marketing, not everything works, but some things do. And as long as you're spreading your bets to a point and not throwing all your apples in one basket, and, you know, yes, we've had to pour some kind of nugget that then allows you to explore that sort of combination more, and go from it from there. You know, it's it's very interesting. But thank you very much, Jack. Have you got any ending comments that you wanted to?
I don't know how to follow that, Joe. I got really pumped up. Yeah, I completely agree with both of you that it's go with your gut, be brave, and try things. It's kind of the mantra now, because it's very difficult for us to rely on data analytics and market research in a market that's changing every week. So,
well, not just your relationship, you know,
what feels right and what you would expect from a business that's marketing to you. So focus on your customers and just be brave.
It's going to grow. Yeah, let's leave it there. Cheers, guys.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, bye.
Thanks. Bye.